Welcome to this explainer on Adam Grant's absolutely brilliant book, Think Again. We live in this incredibly fast-changing world where information is just doubling by the minute, and yet so many of us spend our entire lives clinging really tightly to old assumptions. So today, we're going to explore why true intelligence isn't actually about how much knowledge you can cram into your head. It's really about how quickly and effectively you can update your beliefs when you're faced with a totally new reality. Have you ever found yourself locked in an argument on the internet or maybe across the dinner table, and midway through you just realize, wow, literally no one is listening? Yeah, we have all been there. Or maybe you've held on to a specific belief, a career path, or even a relationship way past the point where the evidence showed it just wasn't serving you anymore. This happens because our default human instinct is to fiercely protect our current worldviews. And that is exactly why cultivating the rare ability to rethink everything is absolutely critical for your personal growth, making better decisions, and just building stronger relationships in general. So here's our agenda for today's journey into unlearning. We'll start with the Trap of Certainty, then embracing the scientist mindset, and finding the confident humility balance. After that, we'll cover how to persuade others, building psychological safety, and finally, escaping escalation of commitment. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The Trap of Certainty. We are going to explore the psychological roles that actually block us from learning. Grant points out that when we communicate, we typically fall into one of three default psychological traps: the preacher, the prosecutor, or the politician. When we feel our core values are under attack, boom, we become a preacher. Our only goal is to deliver a sermon and protect our sacred beliefs, which obviously makes us completely immune to changing our own minds. When we just want to win an argument, we switch to a prosecutor. We comb through the other person's logic just to find flaws and tear them down. And then, when we want to fit in, we become a politician, campaigning for support and prioritizing social consensus over objective truth. The huge problem here? All three of these roles dangerously assume we already possess the ultimate truth, so the door to learning is just slammed completely shut. And here is a deeply counterintuitive, kind of wild fact. Research actually shows that the smarter you are, the harder it can be to rethink. High intelligence can literally create a dangerous blind spot. Because you're highly skilled at finding patterns and building logical arguments, you become exceptionally good at rationalizing your existing biases. You end up using your massive intellect to defend your current position as a preacher or prosecutor, instead of using it to discover where you might actually be completely wrong. All right, Section 2, Embracing the Scientist Mindset. Let's look at redefining intelligence and identity. So the ultimate goal we should all be striving for is to adopt the scientist mindset. Think about it. A scientist treats every single opinion as just a temporary hypothesis, and every piece of data as a test. When you're in this mode, you don't let your ideas become your identity. When the evidence contradicts your theory, you don't get defensive, you gladly abandon the old view in pursuit of the truth. Operating like a scientist means you favor humility over pride and curiosity over blind conviction. Now, doing this requires a massive paradigm shift. You have to discover what Grant calls the joy of being wrong. From an early age, we're basically conditioned to believe that mistakes are shameful, right? Just painful blows to our ego. But if you're operating as a scientist, discovering you are wrong should actually bring you joy. It means you just learned something new. You just upgraded your understanding of the world and successfully shed a totally incorrect hypothesis. To make this practical in your everyday life, you have to separate your opinions from your identity. If you define yourself by values like curiosity and learning rather than your current beliefs, changing your mind just becomes a natural part of growth. A really fantastic example of this is Ray Dalio, the founder of the massive investment firm Bridgewater Associates. He built this whole culture of radical transparency by actively searching for his own mistakes and encouraging his employees to constantly challenge his ideas. He realized that finding out where he was wrong was infinitely more valuable than just proving he was right. Moving on to Section 3, the confident humility balance, navigating the space between certainty and doubt. We usually assume that doubt and confidence are on total opposite ends of a spectrum. On one end, when you have high doubt and low confidence, you get imposter syndrome. You just feel capable of absolutely nothing. But on the flip side, with zero doubt and high confidence, you fall into the armchair quarterback syndrome. You vastly overestimate your abilities while completely ignoring your own ignorance. And honestly, neither of these extremes does you any favors. So the crucial point here is finding that sweet spot in the middle. Confident humility. This is having the absolute belief in your ability to achieve a goal in the future, combined with the incredibly realistic awareness that you probably might not have the correct strategy right now. It gives you the courage to tackle really difficult challenges while making sure you stay humble enough to prepare, research, and adapt your strategy along the way. You keep faith in your capacity, but you stay deeply critical of your current knowledge. Section 4. How to persuade others. It's time to move from arguments to actual influence. Okay, so when we want to persuade someone to rethink their position, our natural human instinct is to play prosecutor. We'd bring out long lists of facts and just try to logic bully them into submission. But behavioral research proves this almost always backfires because of something called the argument dilution effect. When you overwhelm someone with a barrage of arguments, they just feel attacked. They actually stop listening to your strongest points, they find the absolute weakest point in your long list, dismiss it, and then reject your entire message. Quality always trumps quantity when it comes to persuasion. So instead of lecturing, try a much more powerful technique: motivational interviewing. The core principle here is that you literally cannot force someone to change their mind. You can only help them discover their own motivation to change. You do this by asking open-ended questions. For example, if someone holds a really strong opinion, ask them to rate their understanding of the topic on a scale of 1 to 10. They'll usually confidently say a 7 or 8. Then, politely ask them to explain the step-by-step mechanism of how that process actually works. Very quickly, they realize they only understand it at like a level 2 or 3. This gently exposes the gaps in their certainty, giving them the space to rethink without feeling humiliated or defensive. And this approach is exactly how we can break through today's intense societal polarization. Binary thinking, where we reduce complex debates into simple good versus evil or right versus wrong, is just destroying our ability to communicate. Instead, we have to intentionally explore the gray areas. By presenting topics as nuanced spectrums, highlighting the middle ground, and just acknowledging uncertainties, you make people significantly less defensive and way more open to finding a consensus. True persuasion isn't a battle, guys. It's a dance. Which brings us to Section 5. Building psychological safety. Let's look at fostering environments of continuous learning. Harvard professor Amy Edmondson studied hospital teams and discovered a massive paradox. She found that high-performing teams actually reported significantly more medical errors than low-performing teams. Now, to be clear, they weren't actually making more mistakes. Rather, they felt safe enough to report their errors without the fear of punishment. And that allowed the entire team to learn from those mistakes and prevent them from happening in the future. These high-performing teams were thriving because they possessed psychological safety. That's the shared belief that taking risks, asking questions, and admitting your mistakes will not result in any negative consequences, ridicule, or social rejection. Leaders, managers, and even parents build the safety by modeling vulnerability. When you publicly admit when you are wrong and you actively invite dissenting views, you are signaling to everyone around you that rethinking is a celebrated strength, definitely not a punishable weakness. And finally, Section 6, escaping escalation of commitment, knowing when to let go. Why on earth do we stay in toxic relationships, unfulfilling careers, or failing business ventures way after we know they just aren't working? It's a psychological trap called the escalation of commitment. Because we've already invested so much time, money, and effort, our desire to justify our past choices leads us to just double down on a failing path. We're driven by this fear of regret and a desire to protect our image. We falsely view pivoting as some embarrassing failure rather than what it truly is: smart, necessary adaptation. To escape this trap, Grant highly recommends scheduling regular life audits. Treat them exactly like a medical checkup, but for your life's direction. Every 6 to 12 months, sit down and really evaluate your trajectory. Make sure your current goals actually align with who you are today, not who you were 5 years ago. By formalizing this process, you actively give yourself permission to rewrite your direction before you waste years heading the completely wrong way. I want to leave you with this final, provocative question to ask yourself during your next life audit. Are you staying on your current path because it genuinely brings value to your life right now, or simply because you spent years getting here? Remember, we live in a world that heavily rewards loud certainty, but your ultimate superpower is the willingness to admit what you don't know, let go of outdated assumptions, and continuously discover new truths. Keep rethinking, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.